Hi, my friends. Today I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it. The morning sun crept through the lace curtains, casting a warm glow across the room. I stirred, groggy from another restless night, and my eyes landed on the picture frame by my bedside, a family portrait from years ago. My wife Clarissa stood radiant, her arm around our son, Oliver, who wore his signature mischievous grin. In the picture opposite, Stella, our daughter, sat in a wheelchair, her face frozen in a delicate smile. That picture had been taken a year after the accident that changed everything. A year after we buried half our family and Stella's legs stopped working. For 2 decades, my life revolved around her. Every morning, I woke before dawn, prepared her breakfast, and gently woke her up, careful to keep the routine comforting. Despite her age, Stella had retained a youthful grace, and I found solace in her presence, even though our days were often filled with quiet sadness. The house, once lively with laughter, now echoed with the hum of medical equipment and the soft murmur of the television. I entered Stella's room, a place meticulously organized with her favorite books, a television, and a small collection of plants she adored. "Good morning, Stella." I greeted her with a smile, opening the curtains to let in the morning light. "Morning, Dad," she replied, her voice soft but steady. Stella had grown into a beautiful woman, her dark hair framing her pale face. Her eyes, a striking shade of green, often held a quiet resilience that inspired me to keep going. I lifted her gently from the bed, feeling the familiar weight of her body as I placed her in the wheelchair. It was a routine we had perfected over the years. I knew the exact pressure to apply, the precise angle to hold her, to avoid causing discomfort. Our movements were synchronized, an unspoken dance of care and love. In the kitchen, I prepared her favorite breakfast, pancakes with blueberries and a hint of cinnamon. As we ate, Stella talked about a book she was reading, her voice animated. These moments, rare as they were, brought a sense of normalcy to our lives. But beneath the surface, there was always an undercurrent of pain and loss. After breakfast, we spent some time in the garden. Stella loved the outdoors, and I had cultivated a small garden with vibrant flowers and a vegetable patch. As I pushed her wheelchair along the garden path, she pointed out the blooming roses and the sprouting tomatoes. It was in these quiet moments that I felt closest to her, the silence between us filled with unspoken understanding. But there was something different about today. As we sat by the rose bushes, I noticed a faint twitch in Stella's fingers. It was barely perceptible, a slight movement that could easily be dismissed. Yet it caught my eye and set my heart racing. Could it be possible? I shook off the thought, attributing it to my tired eyes and overactive imagination. That night, as I helped Stella into bed, the image of her fingers twitching haunted me. I lay awake in my room, staring at the ceiling, replaying the day's events. Was it just a muscle spasm, or was there something more? The doubt gnawed at me, making sleep elusive. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something I was missing, something Stella wasn't telling me. In the quiet of the night, a decision formed. I needed to know the truth. For 20 years, I had accepted the doctor's prognosis without question, had believed Stella's every word. But now, doubt had crept in, and I couldn't ignore it. I would find out if there was more to Stella's condition than met the eye, even if it meant uncovering a truth I wasn't prepared for. The next morning, the thought of Stella's fingers twitching stayed with me like an unwelcome shadow. I went through our morning routine with a distracted mind, my eyes constantly flickering to Stella's hands, her legs, searching for any sign of movement. As the days passed, I noticed other small, subtle gestures, her foot slightly adjusting its position on the wheelchair footrest, a barely noticeable shift in her posture. Could these movements be real? Or was I simply seeing what I wanted to see, hoping against all reason for a miracle? I couldn't bear the thought of confronting Stella without proof. Not when the truth might shatter our carefully constructed world. I needed to be sure, needed to see it with my own eyes. And so, with a heavy heart, I made a decision that felt both necessary and deeply wrong. That afternoon, while Stella napped, I left her with the nurse who came to help a few times a week and went into town. I purchased a set of small, discreet cameras, feeling a mix of guilt and determination. The drive home was filled with conflicting emotions. Guilt for spying on my own daughter, but also a desperate need to uncover the truth. What if she was hiding something from me? What if all these years of care and devotion had been based on a lie? That night, after Stella was asleep, I carefully installed the cameras in various rooms of the house, making sure they were well hidden. I felt like a villain in a spy novel, sneaking around in the dark, but I justified my actions as necessary. If there was even the slightest chance that Stella could walk, I needed to know. The cameras were linked to a tablet I kept in my room, allowing me to monitor the feeds without Stella's knowledge. The next morning, my heart pounded with anticipation as I checked the recordings. The screen showed Stella's room, dimly lit by the early morning light. She lay motionless in bed, just as she had every morning for the past 20 years. I sighed, feeling a mixture of relief and disappointment. Perhaps I had been imagining things, driven by an irrational hope. But then something changed. As the nurse entered the room to help Stella with her morning routine, I watched in stunned silence as Stella's face shifted from a sleepy daze to a clear, conscious expression. The nurse left briefly to fetch supplies, and in those few moments, Stella's movements were unmistakable. She lifted her hand, brushed her hair from her face, and sat up in bed. My breath caught in my throat as she swung her legs over the edge of the bed and stood up. My world tilted. Stella walked to the dresser, her steps hesitant but deliberate. She looked at herself in the mirror, adjusting her hair, before returning to bed and resuming her usual position just as the nurse returned. The transformation was surreal, like watching a scene from a play where the actors change roles between acts. I sat back stunned, the tablet slipping from my hands. For 20 years, I had cared for Stella, believed in her paralysis, and dedicated my life to supporting her. And now, in a few minutes, everything I thought I knew had been turned upside down. Stella could walk. She had been walking. The realization was a knife to my heart, a betrayal so deep it left me gasping for breath. But beneath the anger and confusion was a torrent of questions. Why? Why would she pretend to be paralyzed? What had driven her to deceive me for so long? I needed answers, but I couldn't just burst into her room and confront her. This was delicate, and I had to approach it with care. Over the next few days, I continued to monitor the cameras, gathering more evidence of Stella's secret. She moved cautiously, always when she thought she was alone, never for long. It was clear she was hiding her abilities, but why? The more I watched, the more conflicted I felt. My anger was tempered by a growing sympathy. What kind of fear or pain could drive her to such an elaborate ruse? Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to talk to her, had to understand her reasons. I rehearsed the conversation in my mind, trying to find the right words, the right tone. But when the moment came, standing outside her room with my hand on the door, all my preparation fell away. I took a deep breath and knocked, my heart racing. "Stella, we need to talk," I said, opening the door. She looked up from her book, her expression guarded. I hesitated, searching her face for any sign of guilt or fear. "I know." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. Stella's eyes widened, and for a moment, she looked like a frightened child. Then slowly, she exhaled and closed the book. "You know what, Dad?" she asked, her voice steady, but there was a tremor beneath it. I walked into the room, closing the door behind me. "I know you can walk, Stella. I've seen you." The silence in the room was palpable, stretching between us like a taut string ready to snap. Stella's face turned pale, her eyes flickering with a mix of fear and defiance. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it, her gaze dropping to her hands. I waited, my own emotions churning, unsure whether I felt more betrayed or concerned. Finally, Stella spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "How did you find out?" I swallowed hard, the truth feeling like a betrayal of its own. "I saw you on the cameras," I admitted, watching her reaction closely. She flinched, a flash of hurt crossing her face. "I didn't know what else to do, Stella. I noticed small things, and I couldn't ignore them. I had to know the truth." She looked away, her hands trembling. For a moment, I thought she might deny it, continue the charade. But then she sighed, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "I guess you deserve to know," she murmured, "but it's not what you think." I felt a pang of anger. What am I supposed to think, Stella? For 20 years, I cared for you, believed you were paralyzed. And now I find out it's all been a lie? Why? Why would you do this? She looked up, tears glistening in her eyes. "It wasn't a lie, not at first," she said, her voice cracking. "After the accident, I was paralyzed. The doctor said I might never walk again, and for a long time, I believed them. But then, things changed." She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "A few years after the accident, I started to feel things again. Little sensations at first, tingling in my legs. I didn't tell anyone because I was scared. Scared that it was just a fluke, that it would go away, but it didn't. I started to regain some movement, little by little." I listened, stunned, as she continued. "I didn't know what to do. By then, we settled into this life, this routine. You were so devoted, so focused on taking care of me. I didn't want to disrupt everything. And I was afraid that if I told you, you'd be angry, that you'd think I was lying, or that I'd somehow chosen to stay paralyzed. The anger in me began to melt away, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. Stella, I would never think that. You were my daughter, my responsibility. All I wanted was to take care of you." Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she wiped them away angrily. "I know, Dad, but it was more than that. I was scared of what it would mean to walk again, to be normal. It felt safer to stay in the wheelchair, to keep living the way we were. I was terrified of facing the world, of what people would think, of having to explain everything." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. All these years, I had thought I was doing the right thing, taking care of her, shielding her from the world. But in reality, I had been part of the problem, creating an environment where she felt she couldn't be honest with me, with anyone. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "Stella, I'm not angry. I'm just hurt. I wish you had felt you could trust me, that we could have faced this together." She nodded, fresh tears spilling over. "I know, and I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to handle it." And then the longer it went on, the harder it was to tell you the truth. I was stuck, Dad. Trapped in this lie I created, and I didn't know how to get out. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the years pressing down on us. I reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "It's okay, Stella. We're here now, and we can figure this out together. You're not alone." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of relief and sorrow. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. I thought about it, the enormity of the situation settling in. "First, we get you help. Proper medical evaluations, physical therapy. We start working towards your recovery, whatever that looks like, and we talk honestly about everything. No more secrets." She nodded, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "Okay, I'll do it. I want to try, for real this time." As we sat there, holding hands, I felt a sense of cautious optimism. It wouldn't be easy, but we would face it together. For the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope that things could change, that we could find a new normal, one built on truth and understanding. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of appointments and assessments. Stella and I navigated the labyrinth of doctors, specialists, and therapists, each one offering a piece of the puzzle to her recovery. It was overwhelming, both physically and emotionally, but for the first time, we were confronting the reality of her condition head-on. The first step was a comprehensive medical evaluation to determine the extent of Stella's regained mobility. I sat in the waiting room, my hands clenched in my lap, as she underwent a series of tests. The anticipation was agonizing, a mix of hope and fear churning in my stomach. When the doctor finally emerged, his expression was cautiously optimistic. "Mr. Osborne, Stella has shown remarkable improvement. The paralysis she experienced was likely more psychological than physical, a response to the trauma of the accident. Her muscles are weak from disuse, but with intensive physical therapy, there's a good chance she can regain full mobility." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but it was tempered by a sense of guilt. Had we both been so wrapped up in our grief and routines that we failed to see the signs of her recovery sooner? The doctor continued, explaining the treatment plan, a combination of physical therapy, psychological counseling, and support from a neurologist. It was a comprehensive approach designed to address both the physical and emotional aspects of her condition. Stella was nervous but determined. Her first physical therapy session was a tentative step into the unknown. The therapist, a kind woman named Alina, was patient and encouraging. Stella struggled at first, her movements stiff and uncertain. But as the sessions progressed, I saw a transformation. She started with simple exercises, stretching and strengthening her muscles, then gradually moved to more complex tasks like walking with support. Watching Stella relearn how to walk was both inspiring and heartbreaking. There were days when she was frustrated, her progress slow and painful, but she persevered, pushing through the discomfort and fear. I was there for every session, cheering her on, my heart swelling with pride at her determination. In parallel, Stella began seeing a psychologist, Dr. Karen Mitchell, to work through the psychological barriers that had kept her confined to the wheelchair. These sessions were tough, delving into the trauma of the accident, the loss of our family, and the guilt she felt for hiding her recovery. Stella opened up in ways she never had before, revealing the depths of her fears and insecurities. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of therapy, Stella and I sat in the living room, exhausted but content. She leaned back on the couch, her legs stretched out in front of her, a sight that still felt new and miraculous. "How are you feeling?" I asked, handing her a cup of tea. She smiled, a tired but genuine smile. "Better. It's hard, but it's also freeing. I spent so long pretending, hiding. It feels good to finally be honest, to not have to lie anymore." I nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "I'm proud of you, Stella. You've come so far in such a short time." She looked down at her cup, her expression thoughtful. "I couldn't have done it without you, Dad. You've been my rock through all of this." My heart ached with a mix of love and regret. I wish I had seen the signs sooner, that I had been more aware, but we're here now, and that's what matters. We sat in comfortable silence, the bond between us stronger than ever. The journey was far from over, but we were making progress. Stella's physical strength improved daily and her confidence grew. She began to take tentative steps without support, her movements more fluid and assured. Each milestone was a victory, celebrated with quiet pride. But it wasn't just her physical recovery that mattered. Stella was also rediscovering herself, exploring new interests and reconnecting with old ones. She started painting again, filling the house with vibrant canvases that reflected her emotions and experiences. It was as if she was reclaiming her life, piece by piece, and it was beautiful to witness. One afternoon, after a successful therapy session, Stella surprised me by suggesting we go out for dinner. It was the first time she had expressed a desire to leave the house for something other than medical appointments. We went to her favorite restaurant, a cozy Italian place we used to frequent as a family. As we sat at the table, Stella looked around, a wistful smile on her face. "It's been so long since I've been here," she said, her eyes shimmering with memories. I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. "It has, but it's good to be back." As we enjoyed our meal, Stella shared her thoughts and dreams, things she hadn't talked about in years. She spoke of wanting to travel, to see the world beyond the confines of our small town. She talked about maybe going back to school, exploring new career paths. It was as if a dam had broken and all the possibilities she had suppressed for so long came flooding out. I listened, my heart swelling with pride and hope. Stella was no longer the fragile, paralyzed girl I had cared for all these years. She was a strong, resilient woman, ready to embrace life in all its complexities. It was a bittersweet realization, knowing that she was on the path to independence, that my role in her life would change. As we drove home that night, I felt a profound sense of peace, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful for the future. The weeks turned into months, and Stella's progress was nothing short of remarkable. Her physical strength continued to improve, and she grew more confident in her movements. She started taking walks around the neighborhood, enjoying the freedom of being outside and reconnecting with the world. But it wasn't just her physical recovery that was flourishing. Stella was blossoming in every aspect of her life. She enrolled in an online course in art therapy, combining her passion for painting with a desire to help others. It was a perfect fit, and she threw herself into her studies with enthusiasm. The house was filled with her artwork, each piece a testament to her journey and growth. One day, as I was returning from running errands, I found Stella in the living room, nervously fidgeting with her hands. She looked up as I entered, her expression a mix of excitement and anxiety. "Dad, I need to tell you something," she said, her voice wavering slightly. I sat down beside her, concerned. "What is it, sweetheart?" She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I've met someone. His name is David, and well, we're dating." The words hung in the air, and I felt a rush of emotions. Stella had kept to herself for so long, isolating herself from others. The news that she was seeing someone was both surprising and heartwarming. I smiled, reaching out to hold her hand. "That's wonderful, Stella. Tell me about him." She blushed, a shy smile spreading across her face. "He's a fellow student in my art therapy class. We started talking online, and we just clicked. He's kind, understanding, and he knows about everything. My past, the accident, my recovery. He's been really supportive." As she spoke, I could see the happiness in her eyes, a light that hadn't been there for years. It was a testament to her healing, not just physically, but emotionally. Stella had spent so long hiding from the world, and now she was stepping out, embracing new experiences and connections. I met David a few weeks later, and I was immediately struck by his warmth and sincerity. He was patient and gentle with Stella, treating her with the respect and care she deserved. It was clear that he was genuinely invested in her well-being and happiness, and for that, I was grateful. As Stella and David's relationship blossomed, I found myself adjusting to a new role in her life. For so long, I had been her primary support, her protector. Now I was learning to step back, to allow her the space to grow and explore on her own. It wasn't always easy, but it was necessary. Stella needed to find her own way, to build a life that was truly hers. One evening, as we sat in the garden enjoying the warm summer breeze, Stella turned to me with a serious expression. "Dad, I've been thinking a lot about the future," she began. "I want to move out, find my own place. I think it's time for me to be independent, to start living on my own terms." Her words were like a knife to the heart, but I knew she was right. It was time for her to spread her wings, to embrace the independence she had fought so hard to reclaim. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I understand, Stella. I'm so proud of you, and I want you to be happy. If moving out is what you need to do, then I support you." She smiled, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you, Dad. You've been amazing, more than I could ever ask for. But I need to do this for myself." In the weeks that followed, we worked together to find her a small apartment not far from our home. It was a charming space, filled with natural light and potential. We spent weekends shopping for furniture, decorating the rooms, and making it feel like home. It was a bittersweet process, each step a reminder that she was moving on, but also a celebration of her independence. The day Stella moved out was a mix of emotions. I helped her carry boxes into the new apartment, setting up her belongings and making sure everything was in place. We stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by the trappings of her new life, and I felt a swell of pride and sadness. "This is it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Your new home." Stella smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "It feels surreal, but good. I'm excited and a little scared, but I know it's the right thing." I pulled her into a hug, holding her close. "You're going to do great, Stella. You've come so far, and I know you'll keep going. I'm always here for you, no matter what." Back at home, I sat in the quiet of the house, reflecting on the past 20 years. There had been so much loss, so much pain, but also incredible growth and healing. Stella's recovery had not only been physical but emotional and spiritual. She had found herself again, and in doing so, had given me the greatest gift of all, the chance to see her truly live. As I looked out the window, the sun setting in a blaze of colors, I felt a sense of closure. It was time to let go, to embrace the new chapter in both our lives. Stella was no longer the fragile girl I had cared for. She was a strong, independent woman, ready to face the world. And I too was ready for whatever came next, knowing that our bond, forged through love and perseverance, would never fade.